Joining on the sofa with Esther is Amber Weeks, jazz recording artist who will be talking about life, music, and her latest release of A Lady with a Song. Amber Weeks celebrates Nancy Wilson. Okay, so good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are across the globe. Welcome to another On the Sofa with Esther. Well, today, this afternoon, good night, wherever you are, I've got another incredible guest, and her name is Amber Weeks. And I am so looking forward to the next 20, 30 minutes of having an incredible conversation with this jazz recording artist. And how did I find out about Amber? Well, a couple of weeks ago, as I was scrolling through TikTok, I came across this woman and she was performing, and I'm like, wow. And I was drawn to Amber because she's very nostalgic, but it took me back in time, and I like to go back in time because I'm an old soul. And I thought I need to speak to her. So welcome anyway, without me going too much into this. Welcome, Amber.
Thank you, Esther. It's an honor to be here. Thank
Oh,
you very
lovely,
much.
lovely. And you're looking well today. You said you had a reunion yesterday, but you were looking very well for it.
Thank you. We had a good time last night. I've got to see some people I haven't seen in the last 10 years or more. So it was a lot of fun. And I'm happy to be here with you now.
Yes, absolutely. And we're gonna unpeel you a little bit. But before we go any further into your journey, into your story, into your history, into your experiences, I like to ask my guests, who is Amber in a nutshell, in a peanut shell, or a coconut shell? Who is Amber Weeks?
Well, I almost want to say a coconut shell only because, of course, as you know here, Kamala Harris is running for president, and she talked about her mother saying, you didn't just fall out of a coconut tree. And my roots are primarily from the Caribbean and Mexico. So
Okay.
yeah, so in a coconut shell. I was born and raised here in Los Angeles. My parents, who are of West Indian and Mexican background, were either reared or born in New York City. My grandparents, who were from Barbados and Jamaica,
Ah,
uh, had a restaurant in Harlem in the Sugar Hill district that was just a couple blocks from where Duke Ellington, Lena Horne, and several others lived. And so my father, as a young man, was serving Duke Ellington, Lena Horne, and was around Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier before they became big names. So music and acting were always part of our family's history. And my father was a huge Frank Sinatra clone in the 50s. And so I was always around the Great American Songbook as well as other genres. That just kind of stuck for me. And so growing up in a house full of music, and then we also had friends who were jazz musicians, I was going to sing. There was no question about that. And so I've been singing for quite some time, and just before the pandemic, decided to really launch a fuller recording catalog. And so since January of 2020, I've released 4 albums, and the most recent one was released in June of this year, and it's A Lady with a Song.
mhm.
Amber Week celebrates Nancy Wilson, and she was one of many influences on me, and someone whose music my sister Dawn and I would stand on the coffee table and we'd sing everything. Imagine a 4-year-old singing Guess Who I Saw, you know. So
Gonna be a
that's me in a coconut shell.
I mean, I'm looking forward to unpeeling and unraveling all that because you mentioned Barbados, and my parents are of, I'm from a Barbadian heritage as well, parentage. And but as I'm speaking to you, just in the few seconds that you've spoken, I really want to ask you, what was it like for you growing up around those legends? I mean, sometimes that can seem like a silly question because at the time you're just around them and
Right,
they're just part of your life.
right.
But what was it? When did you first realize? who you were, the I would say the class of people, the types of people that you were around? When did you first realize their significance, if I may put it that way?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. And you know, these were people my father was around, right? So he infused that into us in telling us the legend of our family. Um, it was much later. I mean, Diane Carroll was part of that as well. And I think, you know, we were fortunate enough to have some of my father's friends from New York around us here in LA, as you know, from birth on. We all lived in the same building, in fact. Um, so I think, you know, television does a lot to let you know that somebody's important. My first vivid memory is of Diane Carroll, because she was the first Black woman to have her own series here in in the United States. And so to see, I already knew about her because my parents both had childhood connection to her. So I think that was it, you know, and then she had a summer replacement series where she was standing in front of a microphone and she was singing and she was telling all of these stories about people like Carmen Miranda and Josephine Baker and those sorts of people. And then I think that was the beginning of it. I was still rather young to see. I did see Harry Belafonte on TV as well when he would perform. And then I think I had to be a little bit older before I actually saw Sidney Poitier in any movies. And I think at that point I realized how fortunate I was to have some connection to them. I mean, I did not know them well. I met Sydney, Harry, and Diane all at different times. And they had very fond memories of my family and the restaurant. And so I do feel very fortunate in that way. But I think I had to probably be, yeah, like I said, Diane, when she came out on television, I think I realized it. I think the others, I was probably in my teen years when I realized just what a big deal they were. And in fact, parenthetically, in Sidney Poitier's first memoir, This Life, he actually has a lengthy story about his relationship and engagement to my Aunt Dolores. And he talks about the family in the restaurant.
Mm.
I think when I saw that, because my father would tell me that story, and I just thought, oh, Dad, you're just telling me another story. And then when he actually handed me the book, he's like, no, look, you know, I think then I realized just how significant the connection is. Um, so yeah.
I mean, we are going to come to the album that came out this year, "A Lady with a Song." But I'm just going to dip in and out of your past because also you've produced 4 albums, and I was dipping in and out of those, and there was quite a few from so around midnight reimagined that really sort of drew me in. And like I said, I am going to come to the latest album, but I'm just dipping and diving into those. I mean, a couple of my favorite from that one, if I may look at this, is there was Sister Moon, Summertime, and then there was Summer Samba. And those are, I mean, Summer Samba, what I've put down against it, sorry, ladies and gents, it is one of those things, you know, glasses on, glasses off. Um, Summer Samba, I put down as gentle and nostalgic. Sister
Okay.
Summertime was sassy and sultry. And then there's The Man That Got Away. And I put lamentingly sultry, almost tearful. Um, because what reading through your bio and just touching a bit on Nancy Wilson, there's this whole thing about you in terms of storytelling and using the different emotions to really bring out the story about those emotions or about the emotions that you are going through or that people are going through. And so you're very able to poignantly really touch on not just the nostalgia in yourself, but on the emotion, but also there's always this theme of this beautiful jazzy theme of coming through. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Yes. I've never heard those descriptions before, but I love them all. Thank you.
I can get a bit deep sometimes because I'm an empath, so I feel things quite deeply and subtly, and I can get swept away. And so now we are going to talk about your latest album that you said was released in June, and we are going to talk a bit more about, why Nancy Wilson. I know she was someone that inspired and influenced you, but um, what was it particularly specifically about Nancy? Why you wanted to um, celebrate her in this album?
Well, it's there's a lot to unpack with that. What I'll say is that again, she was someone that, like, from very, very small, I heard her music in our home. I think, and especially because I was so young, one of the things that I consider to be Nancy Wilson's gift is her ability, or was her ability, to tell a story. And, from my perspective as a singer, as a performer, I think, and I appreciate what you said about the other songs, but for me, every single song is its own play. And it's a 3-minute play, or it's a 6-minute play, or, whatever. And so there's something about allowing myself to take the moment of that particular song and really perform it, right? And share the emotions of it with the audience. And Nancy Wilson was great, I think, at doing that, in selling the song. It was like, if it was a really happy song, she was giving you the happiness. If there was something to contemplate in it, like Guess Who I Saw Today. And for me, there's a brilliance in the way that she does that song, because you cannot give away the punchline, you know, and you have to stay in the moment, in the second of that song. And because that's something as a performer that I relate to, she was an obvious choice. The other part of it is, she was really unique, and she did, well, I consider myself to be a jazz vocalist. She
Mhm.
considered herself to be a song stylist.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I think that because she set herself apart, I don't know that everyone has honored her the way that they should, you know. She retired a few years before she passed away. She did pass away the end of 2018. And I think with 2019, people, when they want to honor someone, they do kind of give the space. But then we got into 2020 and a lot of stuff just didn't happen.
Mhm.
And I think that um, because of the uniqueness of her style, I felt like it was time to celebrate her. And so that's my very long answer to your question.
Well, that's it. Well, like I said, we've got time. We've got time to give long answers and to expand and to dip into and pull apart. So that's fantastic, because as you're talking also, I'm going to dip back out of this for a bit, but I'm just sensing a lot of honoring in this process, a lot of um, giving odes to, and other than Nancy, who else? I mean, you've mentioned people that you grew up around, that your parents were around, but who else would you say significantly inspired you just yeah, as an artist? Because when I say we can be inspired as individuals, but as an artist, it gives an extra something when you're an artist as well, because each we all have our own unique experiences, but as an artist, as a person, and then as an artist, there's a sort of unique perspective around that. So who else influenced you? Because when you speak about Nancy, she clearly inspired, influenced, and more. So outside of her, who else?
So an obvious one for me is my voice coach, Sue Rainey, whom people don't really remember. But she is a three-time Grammy nominee. I have been working with her for over 20 years, and she has a marvelous vocal range, and her vocal technique is extraordinary and varied and wonderful. So she's someone, of course, that I want to honor and acknowledge. I would say an artist whom people I hope know, and someone I continue to celebrate. And with the exception of my Christmas album and this album, because it was to celebrate Nancy, I would say the other person who's probably the biggest influence on me is Oscar Brown Jr.
Okay.
And I've recorded several of his tunes and am in the process of recording a few more. Oscar, I knew him.
Mm.
Um, and in fact, I say he's my most famous house guest. He actually stayed with me um, about a year before he died. Um, but Oscar was a lyricist and a songwriter who was wonderful about giving commentary on life in general and about his own life experience specifically. And one of the favorites of mine is the song "The Snake," which I've recorded. And it basically is about, this woman. It's an old fable. A woman is going to work and she finds a snake in the snow and she decides that she's going to take it home and revive it. And of course, you know what happens, right? The snake bites her and kills her, you know. But it's a thought-provoking story about remembering that people are who they are. And if you expect something differently, um, it can have a bad result. And another song of his that I love, that I recorded with bassist Trevor Ware, and it's just the two of us, is the song "Brown Baby." And of course, his last name is Brown. He wrote it as a lullaby for his children. It was written during the civil rights era, and it's his hopes and dreams for his children in that time. And I really, I believe the song to be timeless.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then, oh yes, I must say, on Around Midnight Reimagined, I opened the album with the song Hazel's Hips, which is his as well. And Round Midnight Reimagined is a celebration of my late dad. And so I take people through a journey of
Mm.
a night in Harlem with a lot of vignettes. And I opened it with Hazel's Hips because Hazel's Hips is a story about a waitress in a restaurant and the patron who can't take his eyes off of the way that she moves, through the restaurant. And that actually, I chose that song of Oscar's to open the album because it was my acknowledgement of my grandparents' restaurant and the story of Sidney Poitier and my Aunt Dolores.
Wow. Wow. I knew this was going to be a very poignant and deep interview because, because you're sitting there very sort of humbly, and then you're pouring out these nuggets of going, we can expand on that now. This is wonderful. And what attributes do you feel you have learned from being around or from knowing of this caliber of individuals? Because we're all influenced in some way by the people around us, but also we can take away certain attributes, or we build on certain attributes within ourselves because of those experiences, because of those stories. So what do you feel the attributes you personally been able to, well, not so much take away, because they are attributes of self, if that makes sense.
So, oh boy, that's a beautiful question. I think For me, part of it is that excellence is like tangible. It's close. And if I'm going to do something, I want to be excellent at it. It also, in some ways, and I hesitate to say this because it's challenging, but for me, the fact that these people were literally people that my parents and my father especially could reach out and touch. I mean, he served Duke Ellington fried egg sandwiches after his gigs at 2 a.m, that these people are all elevated and celebrated and to some degree canonized. Um, but I get to remember that they were human beings and that because they lived and they did what they did and they provided what they provided, I have the ability and the opportunity to do the same.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And that I stand on their shoulders, which is, it's an extraordinary feeling.
See, that's what I wanted. That's what I was, without trying to, because we can talk about, being legends, pioneers, whichever, and celebrities, but then on that real human basis, the significance that these human beings became incredible because they followed their purpose. They did what they were down here to do. That's the significance of all of that. And then from that, they became great in whatever way people perceived them. But the beauty also is that these individuals had a dream, a purpose, a passion, just like what you're doing and who you've become. And then what you do then, what that then does, it inspires others. And so, because sometimes people sit and think, but they're up there, they're doing this, but what, they weren't always there, and it's the journey they went through, or they chose to go through. And I went to see the documentary of Ella Fitzgerald some years ago when it was shown in London, and what she went through,
Yes.
but then we see how they show up for what they believe in.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I feel that's where it's at. And so as I was listening to your music and I saw you perform, and you can see it's a real soul, not a real jazz soul thing, because but it's a real soul thing. And I guess I want to ask you, how does jazz sing to your soul? What does it do for you, Amber?
Oh my gosh. Well, as a listener, you mean?
As a listener, but also with someone who sings jazz, where does it take?
Yes.
What does it do?
So, okay, I hear you now. Okay, so I would say both as a listener and as a performer is very healing. What I'm moved by in particular when I'm listening to jazz and in this moment, what I'm thinking about specifically is there's this fabulous duet between John Coltrane and Duke Ellington, and it's in a sentimental mood. And I think that's probably my favorite instrumental. And just how you can feel Duke's soul in the way that he's touching the piano keys. And you can hear Coltrane's soul in what he does, and how I'm just enveloped in the sound when I hear that. For me, I'm very selective about the songs that I perform. It has to touch my soul in a certain type of a way. And in performing the individual songs, there are things, there are emotions that are evoked. for me in singing those songs. And what I say is that I'm channeling whatever inspires me inside of the song to then give the love and the healing to the audience. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But there's certain songs you'll never hear me sing. It won't happen. It has to have a meaning, for me personally.
Brilliant, brilliant. And what was it when you were putting this album together? Obviously, it takes you on a journey because the song Supper Time, I hadn't realized. I mean, when I listened to it, and then when I heard, or maybe I read what it was about, I'm like, oh, okay. But then, you've had other songs on the album that brought balance. I mean, so, lady, so just if you can just elaborate with the song Supper Time, and
Sure.
then the track that balanced that out, because it was to do with obviously lynching and yeah. So if you could,
Yes.
so that people know, have a context of what I'm alluding to.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So the song Separate Time specifically was a very deliberate choice. Nancy Wilson's catalog is huge. And that particular song, honestly, I took it because I knew the history of the song. I took advantage of the fact that she had recorded it, though it was not a song she was well known for. The song itself was written in the 1930s by Irving Berlin, specifically for another American singer named Ethel Waters. And at the time, Irving Berlin was partnered with Moss Hart, with whom he wrote a lot of songs like Easter Parade and Heat Wave and a few others that right now I can't remember. And Easter Parade wound up having its own movie musical, and Heat Wave wound up in another musical later. Because these songs had no tie to each other, and Hart and Berlin were making some commentary about things that were going on at the time. So when they put the musical review together, which was premiered on Broadway in 1933, they used newspaper headlines. They created newspaper headlines to tie all of the songs together. The headline for the song Supper Time was Unknown Negro Lynched by an Angry Mob, or by a frenzied mob. And so the song is sung when you hear it in that context, this woman is talking about how is she going to explain to her children what has happened to her husband. And the song has been recorded by a lot of famous singers, some of whom are Black and a lot of them who are not. And if you just sing the song and you don't have the context, all of that context is removed. So what I chose to do, because I knew the story, was I put what people call a spoken word. I just call it a monologue in the middle of it, after what I say is a brilliant violin solo by my producer, Mark Cargill, to then explain what the song is about, because I felt that it was important to take it back to its original context. So that's there. There's also a gospel choir underneath as I'm delivering the monologue. But the rest of the album, yes, is a balance of all of those things. I mean, and again, Nancy was great at giving you all of those different emotions. And I think one of my favorite things that balances it, there are two songs that really balance it well. And one is it's a little sarcastic, but there's the song 10 Good Years, which talks about a woman maybe only having 10 good years to find that partner that she wants. And I'm not going to say any more about it because you have to hear the song to really get the whole story. But the other song, and it's one that's special to me because I remember it as a child. And as far as I know, other than Nancy Wilson, I'm the only one to record it. And I do have a music video for it. And it's the song, Wasn't It Wonderful? Which really celebrates life. If I remember properly, I think it might be, no, it may not be the last song. And maybe it's the second to the last song on the album. I think You're Gonna Hear From Me is the last song. But yeah, I wanted to be able to give as many ranges of emotions inside of one album as I could, because life is a range of emotions. And sometimes it's wonderful, and sometimes it's it can, horrific and very tragic things can happen. And I wanted to celebrate all of it.
Fantastic. There are 13 songs on that album. So, ladies and gents, I would encourage, inspire, and prod you to go out and get A Lady with a Song, celebrating the legendary Nancy Wilson by Amber Weeks. And Amber, winding down, because time has gone. I mean, I'm sitting here. I don't think I've sat back, like this in a while, and really just, I'm fully present with this. I mean, not that I'm not with other interviews, but this is a wonderful, Sunday evening for me. And moving forward, what else is on the cards for Nancy Wilson? Any performances? And what do you do for Christmas? I don't know. Are you doing anything for Christmas? Are you bringing out anything for Christmas? Are you going to surprise us with anything?
Well, I do have a Christmas album that it's called The Gather. It came out in December of 2020, and it was called The Gathering. The irony of that. So I will be, it's not necessarily a re-release. We'll likely repackage it. But I will be elevating The Gathering again for this year. I have some other projects that I'm working on. I do anticipate having one very small project, like an EP, that I'll release hopefully in February of next year for Valentine's Day. And then I have another project I'm not allowed to say much about. As far as performing goes, I will, for those who are in the United States, I am going to be performing at the Max Arts Expo in Indianapolis, Indiana, next week. Yes, a week from tomorrow. And scheduling some other things. I'm hoping to come back to London. I don't have anything scheduled for London yet. If you know anybody over there,
No.
send for me. I want to see my family again. I want to see my friends, because I do have friends and family in London.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. And I do have one last question. If
Yes.
you a recording jazz artist, what else would you be? I mean, you're probably a lot of things in the background, but specifically, who would Amber Weeks be? What would you be doing?
That's a very good question. Something to take care of children. Not sure. Perhaps a nanny. Maybe an elementary school teacher. Yeah, that's the answer that comes to me right now.
Okay. Just thought I'd ask. It was one of those random things that I threw in. Well, Amber, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. Glad we made it work. And ladies and gentlemen, what I will be doing with this, I've got so many to do, but I will be downloading this interview, editing it a little bit, and then putting it up onto YouTube and sort of putting that out again on Wednesday of this week. But I just want to say thank you to Amber.
Thank you.
And like when I listened to your music, it was very lulling for me, because my life is quite intense, and yes, we have our moments, but when I listen to you, and I'm listening to you again today in preparation for this, I just felt myself going at that effect. So thank you so much for what you've shared, and looking forward to hearing more from Amber Weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been an honor. And hello to my family. I love you.
Bless you, and thank you for all those who are listening. I don't actually have my phone with me today because I had to bribe one of my grandkids to just watch this until Nanny finishes the interview. So if you've left a message, then I will respond after this. But thank you to all those who watched, and you will see me same time, same place next week or the week after, because I've got some other fabulous guests coming up. Amber, once again, thank you very much, and wishing you all the best.
Thank you, Esther. It's been a pleasure. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.